everyone to the Indo-American Art Council's annual literary festival. This year, we celebrate our sixth year of bringing you authors, thought leaders, and storytellers from around the world. Many of these stories originate from the Indian subcontinent, and today we celebrate these voices that have been shaped by the Indian ethos and experience. In these unprecedented times, our collective shared experiences have uplifted us and have reshaped our perspectives. For our 2020 festival, we invite our authors to take center stage to bring people together through the art of storytelling. Today, I'd like to welcome Mr. Aseem Chhabra, author of the book Irfan Khan, The Man, the Dreamer, the Star. The book is an intimate and meticulously researched account of this refreshingly unique and unconventional Indian icon. Drawn from personal interviews and told through many voices, Aseem Chhabra traces Irfan's personal and artistic life in all of its many shades. Rich in details and peppered with anecdotes, it is a fascinating look at the life and work of the actor that begins in a small household in Rajasthan and culminates in his face gazing down from billboards of Hollywood. It explores some of his greatest performances that have shown India and the world what cinema can do. Aseem Chhabra has also written bestsellers on Bollywood legends such as Kashish Kapoor and Priyanka Chopra. He's a film journalist, freelance writer, and serves as the film festival director for the prestigious New York Indian Film Festival. Moderating today's session is leading film critic and film journalist, Mr. Rajeev Masand. Rajeev has received distinguished recognition for his contribution to the field of entertainment, and he currently is the host of two digital series, Women We Love and Class Act. I'd just like to welcome you, Aseem. Aseem, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Nili.
Moderating today's session is leading film critic and film journalist, Mr. Rajeev Masand. He has received many accolades and recognitions for his contribution to the field of entertainment. He is currently the host of a digital series on his YouTube channel, such as Women We Love and Class Act. Thank you, Rajeev, for moderating today's session, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Nili. Thank you so much.
I'd like to pass the mic over to you to continue today's session.
Thank you. Thank you. Aseem, it's good to see you.
I know.
This is a book I love. This was a great opportunity to be able to read it a second time. I'm going to start. I'm sorry, but I'm going to start on a bit of a grim note. This has been such a hard year on most people. But one of the biggest losses, I think it's fair to say, really was the passing of Irfan in April. It didn't come as a jolt from the blue for anyone that had been following his treatment and his health updates, but it really felt heartbreaking and shocking, and really for days and months even, it's hard to really believe and to allow it to sink in that he isn't with us anymore. I feel like, Aseem, when a famous person passes, there is heartbreak, and one experiences great sorrow. But with Irfan, and correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like it's personal. I feel like even those that knew him merely just professionally in the way that perhaps you and I did, and I think that even for those that knew him just through his films, just from watching him on screen, it felt like a very deeply personal loss. Your book had come out just months before this. And you do speak of the fact that he was in treatment when you began writing the book. But I can't imagine what it must have been like to learn of his passing.
Yeah, it was quite devastating. I mean, he died on April 29th this year. I remember I was in Bangalore for a Lit Fest early February, where I ran into some people, and they told me that Irfan's condition was really not that good. I mean, I had hoped through 2019, because I was not able to interview him, and I'd WhatsApped him in the past, and he would WhatsApp me back. But in 2019, he stopped responding to my messages also. But you kept hoping that he was getting better. And then this word that I got from some people who also involved in the film industry gave me a sense that really his condition was deteriorating. But again, one didn't expect it to happen so soon. I mean, he was sent. He was in the hospital, I think, a day or two before April 29th. I think 27th to 28th, and Mint had asked me to do an obituary on Irfan in case he dies. I just could not write the obituary. I mean, I had 3 days to write. I didn't know I mean, you kept thinking it will get okay. He will be fine. And so finally, when the word came that he had died, I think I forget who tweeted. I think
Shujit
it was
Sarkar.
yeah. So I mean, immediately the call came again. Remember that obit you had to write, and I didn't even get a chance to mourn his loss. That happened much later because having written the only book on Irfan, suddenly everybody wanted to talk to me, everybody wanted to interview me, and I was willing to talk to everybody, but there's no chance to breathe also. And then you get this space sometime late at night when people stopped calling me, and I'd written 2 pieces already. And then it hits you. 2 years working on this book because I really cared for this man. I mean, he was such a wonderful human being. And actually, Rajeev, I never got to know Irfan very well. I've interviewed him a few times. You lived in Bombay and Mumbai. I lived in New York most of the times. I had met him a few times. I had interviewed him, but it was never in such a intimate manner. Um, and yet it felt like a personal loss. It felt like somebody very, very close to me had died. And the unfortunate thing was that immediately after he died, I couldn't even cry and mourn. It took me at least 12 hours. I had to find time for myself. It was it's still very sad. It's very hard to get over the loss.
This is really a wonderful, insightful book, Aseem, which of course celebrates his incredible life and his career. But what I think is really remarkable about it is really how you piece together such an evocative and compelling portrait of a man through the voice of others. Irfan hasn't spoken in the book, but through the voices of Meera Nair and Tigmanshu Dhulia and Nasiruddin Shah and Konkona Sen Sharma and so many others, what you've done is you've really captured the spirit of this artist, and you've been able to illustrate why he was one of those rare, magnificent talents. But I want to ask you this hypothetical question. Aseem, if you had actually had the opportunity to interview him for the book, can you think of things that you would have liked to ask him? Can you think of things which you feel this book could still benefit from? If you had his voice, what would you ask?
So I think if I had his voice, I would have really wanted to know a lot more about his childhood, about the life in Jaipur. It was around the point, Irfan himself gave me a contact of a very close friend of his called Varun Gautam, who Irfan knew in Jaipur before Irfan came to National School of Drama. And that was the beginning of somebody I talked to who knew Irfan at that point. But the first 10, 15, 20 years of 15 years of his life, I had to go through secondary sources, interview, newspaper articles, etc. I would have really wanted to know much more about his childhood, his relationship with his father, where he talks about a lot, even his relationship with his mother, which often was troubled, and how he was so close to his actually maternal grandmother. Um, that would have been lovely because, when it comes to his career, I had seen all the films I write about, some of the television shows also. And by the time I, started writing about the National School of Drama, I had already connected with at least like 4 or 5 people of his class, mates who told me such intimate stories about him. And that just built on as I worked on the book, really.
Yeah. In fact, it's true. I love the bits where Sudhir Mishra is talking about, about that whole class, that NSD batch that came to watch his first film, and Irfan being
Yes.
one of those, and then going on to work with Irfan. There's a brilliant anecdotes. The other thing that I think is very interesting in the book, Aseem, is that of course, it focuses on 8 or 9 career-defining films of
Mhm.
Irfan, but also it's about how he became this star on 2 continents.
Yes.
What do you think is especially significant about his Hollywood career? I mean, more than any other Indian actor, he's been in the big tentpole films. He's Jurassic Park and Jurassic World and Spider-Man and Inferno. In fact, it's a little bit ironic that he evaded those big budget tentpoles in Bollywood. He kind of
Yes.
stayed away from those kind of movies here, but those were the ones that kind of introduced him to America.
So yeah, Slumdog Millionaire was the starting point as such.
Yeah.
Because of the success of Slumdog Millionaire, Irfan was able to even get an agent in Hollywood, and that led to then him starting to work in Hollywood. What's interesting is that while he did these big tentpole films, you talked about Spider-Man, he was in Inferno, right? The
Jurassic
one,
World, yes.
yeah,
And Inferno,
Jurassic
yes.
Park, etc. And in some of them, Inferno and Jurassic Park, he had pretty substantial roles.
Yeah.
But those films did not explore Irfan the actor as we knew him.
Right.
In fact, if an international project, I'm saying quote unquote, that really explored Irfan the actor was something like Namesake, because it was a Fox Searchlight film, or Lunchbox, even though it was Anurag Kashyap and Guneet behind it, but there was also a lot of international money in that. But I think Irfan just wanted to do and explore different aspects of cinema making and acting. And while I'm sure he made very good money working on films like Jurassic Park, I think it opened the world in a lot more ways. I mean, people even now, or until 2 years ago, when his health was fine, they would think about an Indian actor. The first person they would think is Irfan Khan. Then maybe they would think of Dev Patel because they was younger. Irfan had left that impression in a remarkable way in Hollywood.
Yeah. I love that incident that you mentioned in the book where you were attending the junket for A Mighty Heart in New York, and of course you did the roundtable interview with him, and that he was running, and then after that he asked you in Hindi because he wanted to speak only to you, and he asked you yahan kuch hoga kya? He was asking whether there was a possibility of having a career, and that sounds so much like him. I remember the time that I interviewed him with Tom Hanks in Singapore for Inferno, and Tom Hanks called him India's national treasure. He said he's your national treasure, and I said you couldn't put it better. It's so true.
Right.
You in the book, Aseem, you speak to Naseeruddin Shah about Irfan, and he is so generous and effusive with his praise. And I wonder if that was something you experienced frequently while talking to other actors, because it's that rare thing, right? I mean, for those of us that cover films and cover the movie business, it's so rare to find actors who are so generous in their praise. Now, Naseer is, of course, again, a very different kind of actor, and he's always been very generous. But did you find that frequently? I mean, the actors, they probably realized that he was one of a kind. They didn't mind that they might come across as lesser or smaller, because most of them really were.
Well, Naseer was actually the best example, because I spoke to some other actors also. I probably spoke to more directors and producers.
Yeah.
But Naseer was, and Naseeruddin Shah. There's also the other part of the story when Irfan was in National School of Drama. He was so hung up on Naseer that he would just continuously imitate Naseer's acting. And Meeta Vishesh told me that she would joke with him saying, "Yaar, Irfan chodo is Naseer ko." But. Naseeruddin Shah just says what is true and what comes to his mind. If he doesn't like something, he'll say it right then and there. And the fact that they shared screen time together, the fact that Naseer felt that Irfan was so generous with his in the space, I think that really spoke a lot about Irfan, because Naseeruddin Shah had been acting for so long and had observed so many actors. Even when I wrote to Naseeruddin Shah, when I sent him a text message, he said, Aseem, and I'd never met Naseeruddin Shah, I never interviewed him before. He said, Irfan's a very, very fine actor, and I would love to talk to you. That was so generous of him, really.
Yeah. Were there things, Aseem, how did your own understanding of Irfan change while writing this book? From speaking to the dozens of people that you did, did you have an impression of him from the few times that you had met him? Did it change considerably? Did you find that your own impression of him changed a lot while working on the book?
Yes, it did. For one thing, I did not know that Irfan was a very shy person. That I started hearing from his friends at National School of Drama days itself, that how he would just stay alone in his room and he would smoke a bidi all day long. I think it had to do probably with, and I discussed that with Tigmanshu Dhulia. And Tigmanshu Dhulia comes from Allahabad, and Allahabad is actually not a huge city, but Tigmanshu had a lot more exposure to world cinema and books. Irfan came from a fairly big city, also Jaipur, but his exposure was much less. And what I learned by talking to some people and then reading about it, that Irfan then actually spent a lot of time trying to catch up, and very quickly caught up, because he wanted to be at par with his peers, basically. But he remained very shy throughout. And I think the fine actor that he was, a lot of that comes from, because it was always a challenge for him to go in front of the camera, which he would never let anyone else know. It was all in his mind. and the way he would prepare and everything else. And I think people who are shy, who are quiet, can actually surprise you a lot more once they come on screen. And that was something that I didn't know about Irfan. The other thing I did not know about Irfan was that he would get bored very easily. And he was looking for newer and newer projects, because he had spent 10 years doing television, same thing over and over every day, which was kept him afloat in Bombay. Financially, he was doing okay. He was not starving in Bombay. But he really wanted to do newer and newer things. And then, Shailja Kejriwal, who ultimately became a good friend of theirs and also produced 2 films that Irfan acted in. She said to me, he would just say, "Acha, kuch naya batao, koi nayi story sunao." You remember when he did that? Irfan did that, the AIB video, that's another party song. So I talked to Tanmay and I talked to Vasan Bala, who directed it, and they both said the same thing to me. That they said that it was completely a new thing for Irfan. He had never done this dance, Bollywood lip syncing dance party songs, etc. He really wanted to do it. He wanted to have fun, and he also wanted to explore the actor in him to be able to do it. And that's why he did it. He didn't get paid for it. He spent 3 days of his life doing that. He could have spent that much more financially, more in a better way, but. That's what shows what a great man he was. That when these young AIB guys approached him, he was like, "Haan, karenge."
Were there people that you would have liked to reach out to that, for whatever reason, are not in the book?
Yes, there are 2 people.
Apart from Irfan, of course.
No. There are 2 people who I know, both of them very, very well. One of them, I'll tell you the truth, Vishal Bhardwaj, who's I have huge amount of respect for. And Vishal did some absolutely the most wonderful films. Irfan did some absolutely most wonderful work with Irfan. Vishal kept postponing it. I think what happened was, because Irfan was not able to participate in the book, Irfan told Vishal at one point that the book was unauthorized. And Vishal made it very clear to me. He said, "Aseem, dekho, wo mera dost hai, my relationship, it's not," he said to me, it's not like Irfan has said, "Don't talk to Aseem." But Vishal said, "I don't want it to affect him. I don't want him to feel upset and considering his health." So I was quite heartbroken because, I can pick up the phone and call Vishal and get an interview with him on any other issue, but he didn't want to specifically do this. The other person that I chased for a very long time was Asif Kapadia. Now, Asif had something else happening. Asif was very, very busy with his Maradona film last year and just couldn't find the time to talk to me. But it so happened that in 2005, The Warrior, which Asif directed, that's Irfan's first film. It's a 2000 or 2001 film, but it was released in the US in 2005. So Asif had come in 2005 to promote the film. And I had my interview with him. And it was available online. So I had material from that time period of talking to Asif. So I was able to use that, but I couldn't interview him again.
But you also have those beautiful bits where Tigmanshu's talking about convincing Asif to cast him in Warrior. So that story is actually quite well-rounded and well-represented, even though you haven't got Asif.
And the other person that I'm absolutely so proud and thrilled that I managed to interview was Ang Lee. It was just, I also had to chase Ang Lee for a while, even though his assistant said to me he will give an interview. Ang Lee was busy. The Will Smithy film did called Gemini Man or something.
Man, yes.
He was busy with that. But he gave me an interview, and usually people say, okay, only 10 minutes or 20 minutes. Like for 40 minutes, as it is, I realized that Ang Lee talks a lot. And he has a little gossipy tone where he talks a lot. He wouldn't even give me a chance to ask the second question, which is fine. I was recording the conversation, and it was just wonderful. And he was so generous with his time. Really, he was wonderful.
Between his collaborations with Meera Nair, Vishal Bhardwaj, and Tigmanshu Dhulia, it feels like, certainly from the book and from watching the films that they made together, it feels like Irfan had found in them directors who challenged him with unusual and special roles, but also, they knew that they could trust him. They knew that they could trust his exacting nature, his sort of pursuit for perfection, and his ability to really dig deep and to go down to the recesses of him, of his heart, and find that moment of truth and honesty which you see in his films. Would you say, Aseem, that those are the filmmakers whose films perhaps pushed Irfan and challenged them in a way that a lot of others didn't as much?
Oh yes, I would absolutely agree. I mean, there were some other filmmakers also, probably, and we can talk about that. But I mean, Vishal Bhardwaj, for instance, was remarkable. I mean, really, the first major project that Irfan did in India was
Correct.
Maqbool, which was a lead
Maqbool,
role,
yeah.
and he did very well in it. But then he ended up acting in two other Vishal Bhardwaj's films. Now, Saath Khoon Maaf, of course, it was the Priyanka Chopra film, and many major actors, including Nasiruddin Shah, also all did smaller roles. But Irfan even agreed to do a very small role, a very significant small role in Haider.
That's right.
I mean, Haider is packed with so many other actors. I mean, I don't know why Vishal, for instance, didn't cast. He could have cast Irfan in the role that went to K.K. Menon, but Irfan got a really small role. And my God, does he shine in that role? I mean, he really gives himself totally up in that Rudar character. Um, so that is true. And the other filmmaker that you didn't mention is Ritesh Batra, because the performance that Ritesh got out of Irfan in the lunchbox. I mean, there are so many scenes of Irfan absolutely alone on the screen. I mean, in fact, there's so many scenes of Nimrit also alone on the screen. Yeah. But Irfan is totally alone on the screen, or whether he's alone he's in a train or a bus or something like that, which is like crowded with people, and the camera is just on Irfan's eyes, and he's using his eyes to act. Great performances, but these directors really brought the best out of him, and I think I'm sure he really appreciated that.
The other voice I love in the book, and I love the stories around that film, is Kissa, which I think is just such an underrated, unfortunately, largely unseen film of his. And again, required an incredible talent to be able to play that part convincingly, and to make you as a viewer really make that leap of faith. Because I don't want to spoil it for those that haven't seen it, but that film, I mean, if you're not invested in those characters, particularly Irfan's and Tilottama's, it's hard to make that sort of magic reality, surreal kind of leap that you're meant to. And I love the stories. I mean, can you talk about talking with Anup Singh, with whom, of course, then he did Songs of the Scorpion as well, which I haven't seen, but I really hope to. I have never had access to that film.
So Anup, had been a friend of Irfan from a very long time, from the time Irfan was doing television in the 1990s, and Anup had already made one film. But what's remarkable about Kissa, it's a Punjabi language film. Now, of the four main actors, Tiska Chopra and Rasika Duggal happen to be Punjabi. Tilottama Shom grew up in Delhi, but both Tilottama and Irfan had to go through intense Punjabi accent training, language kind of a thing. And yet the dialogue was very difficult. And this is something that Anup has said a couple of times. He said to me when I interviewed him, and then I interviewed him recently for another festival where Kissa was playing, that one day Anup walked past Irfan, and Irfan was humming something, like he was singing something. And Anup asked him, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm singing my dialogues." And I think that's how, because it was a Punjabi, even though Irfan was from Rajasthan, North India, you think that he could get Punjabi very easily. It was by singing to himself, he was able to get the nuances of the language and the dialogues really. Kissa is a very, very fine film. The first time I saw Kissa, I was so stunned and shocked that it took me a while to really appreciate it. And I think it was a second viewing that I really realized the heartbreak of Irfan's character. The film is called Kissa, the Tale of a Lonely Ghost. We won't give away more. It's a very, very fine film, really.
The other person that you've spoken to and whose voice is throughout this book, and I feel like she really puts things into perspective, is Meera Nair. She's been so generous with her, with her memories. What was it like talking to Meera, whose definitive film? I mean, a lot of people will say Monsoon Wedding is Meera's finest, but I feel like The Namesake really is the one that is just so much deeper. And I have do you have a favorite moment in The Namesake, Aseem? Do you have a moment that you love more than others?
So some of my, there's a moment, and Meera has explained to me that scene. Meera has explained to me the film much more, explained in the sense that how she was thinking. There's a scene toward the middle, towards like the 2/3 of the film, when Irfan is just about to leave for the job in Cleveland, and Irfan and Tabu sit down and they're drinking chai before she drops him off at the airport. And After Meera said to me, I watched it again, the scene, and they're very quietly drinking chai, and not a word is spoken between the two of them. And Meera said that was something she had observed watching her in-laws. She said that's how they would show their love to each other by sitting next to each other and just quietly drinking chai. Or just immediately the scene after that, these are scenes that are not loud and explosive. Tabu goes to drop Irfan at the airport, and so Tabu's standing at a distance, and Irfan is standing in the line to check in. And at one point, Irfan just tilts his head like that. I mean, I guess it's a Bengali way or an Indian way, and she also tilts his head like that, kind of a thing. And there is, so much is unspoken and just said through these little tiny gestures in the film, which makes it so precious, really. But it took Meera such a long time to give Irfan that role, in the sense that when Meera had originally cast Irfan in a pretty substantial role in Salam Bombay, and last minute she had to pull out Irfan from that role because Irfan was very tall, and even though he was quite young, he didn't fit into the crowd of those street kids, because he was much more, coming from a middle class family, and these street kids. And Irfan was devastated. He cried, and Suni has told me, Meera told me a few, I've even read Irfan talking about how he really cried. And the fact that he came back to National School of Drama, imagine being the only one in your class and to say, hey, I'm getting a role in a film, kind of a thing. Tum log to padhte raho, main to film mein act karne ja raha hu. And then you come back and you have to continue with your course because you did not get that role that you had hoped for. It must have been so devastating. But Meera said she promised him. And eventually, not only this, Meera gave him 2 other small roles in this lovely short film called Migration. Of course, is an AIDS film with there are many other actors. But have you seen that film with Natalie Portman?
That's right. The New York I Love You Portman film.
Yes. It's a small, less than 10 minutes film. Suketu Mehta wrote it, called Kosher Vegetarian, and it's so beautiful and so heartbreaking. Both of them are lovely in it.
The other thing I wanted to ask, Aseem, is you focused on a bunch of his commercial films, and I remember it had become a sort of joke. After Irfan had kind of completely broken out and become this, the fourth Khan in a sense. The Khan who can act. I know journalists used to kind of rib him about, but you do a Billu and you do the thank you and you do the odd kind of completely insane Anis Bazmi movie which is clearly one of those things that you do for the money. I mean, can you talk about that? I mean, I know that Billu is a big part of of the book, and in fact I remember Shah Rukh. I mean, it was really Shah Rukh wanting to do something for Irfan. I mean, I remember speaking to Shah Rukh and he just said, I love this guy, and I just felt like it didn't necessarily turn out to be the gift that perhaps added to Irfan's legend, but it came from a place of just wanting to create an opportunity, put him front and center of a commercial masala film.
No, in fact, Billu, I think it's interesting for many reasons. I mean, there's a very unreal part to Billu when all these actresses start to sing these these songs with I guess it was packed with all of those scenes to sell the film. But Irfan was the best thing in Billu.
He was lovely.
There's a genuineness in him. I mean, at one point there's a lot of humor because his family is dying to meet this movie star, and he's constantly has to come up with excuses all the time. And those are hilarious. And the last sequence, I'm sorry. I mean, I'm very fond of Shah Rukh, but Shah Rukh sometimes, often, really hams his way and overacts. And so the scene between Irfan and the Shah Rukh in the end, it is actually Irfan's character that made me cry. I didn't cry watching Shah Rukh in that scene. I mean, Billu didn't go anywhere as a film, but all actors, no matter how good you are. I mean, Shashi Kapoor, when I wrote the book also, Shashi Kapoor did a lot of crappy films in order to survive and make a living, basically. And Irfan had to do that also. But then that's how he would get a chance to do something like Kissa. I'm sure Kissa didn't pay him hardly anything. And yet, as an actor, he always wanted to be challenged.
Correct. I should have brought this up earlier. The other thing I was so grateful for in the book was that memory that Meera shares with you about meeting him in London while he was in treatment and him stealing her friend's bike and sort of taking a quick round. And she knew he was better at that time. I mean, he was at that time responding well to his treatment.
I actually spoke to quite a few people who met him in London. including Vipin
said.
Sharma also. In fact, I end the book with Vipin Sharma's conversation with him. I mean, Tanmay told me that Tanmay and I think some of the other AIB people met him, Irfan, in London, and they all went out for a meal. But Meera spent practically the whole day with him in a coffee shop. And then our Stafford, who has been Meera's friend from Salam Bombay days, now lives in London, joined them on a bike. And Irfan suddenly said, "Main try karta hu." And his energy would come and go depending on when he was getting his chemotherapy. And he rode the bike a little while. And I think Meera was very excited seeing that. So, when I heard those kind of things from people, there was this hope that he would get better, really. You really thought he was getting better. Anyway.
Aseem, how hard or not was it to write this book? I mean, being based in New York for the bulk of it, and carrying out your research, not getting the subject to really lend his voice to the book. Was it a difficult book to write?
Well, I've written 3 books, and all 3 turned out to be unauthorized biographies. I mean, with Shashi Kapoor's book, at least Shashi was unwell, so I couldn't interview him in any case. But Sanjana and Kunal gave me interviews. With the Priyanka Chopra book, I was very close to actually talking to Priyanka, because I went through talking to her lawyers, and I'd interviewed Priyanka a number of times before that, including her mother. But then Priyanka went and signed this contract for her book, which hasn't come out yet. It's going to come out next year, and she was forbidden to talk to any other author. And in Irfan's case, I just kept hoping he would get better, because for a while he was responding to my WhatsApp messages, and we spoke once on the phone, and he gave me some but there is this part of me that I was like, I have to continue writing the book. I mean, I wasn't writing it because I knew that he was unwell, and I actually enjoyed writing it a lot because I really, really like Irfan. And it was such a pleasure to watch Piku again and watch scenes from Piku again, so I could quote those scenes, or Namesake, or many of his other films, even Jurassic Park. It was so much fun to watch it with Irfan, with that cool, the suit that he wears, and so while it is hard not to have the person, and you keep hoping that you might be able to talk to him, the subject of the book, but I actually enjoyed it because of the fact that I started to appreciate him even more while I was writing the book, as I was rewatching the films.
Right. I know we have very little time left, but I want to ask you before we go, Aseem, if you had to give out a cheat sheet to those that are to the uninitiated that are watching this, if you could pick your favorite 3 or 5 Irfan Khan, the essential must-watch films, do you have 5 titles that constantly give you pleasure and that you turn to, when you want to look at the best that he's put out?
So not just because it's an Irfan Khan book, but it's also a Deepika Amitabh book. Piku is my go-to film. I know the dialogues.
It's such a lovely film.
I've seen it about 6-7 times, and I can still watch it, and I can laugh. It's like watching a Seinfeld episode that I've watched them again and again. I can laugh watching Piku. Piku gives me so much comfort and joy. I think it's absolutely fabulous. So I would definitely recommend.
He was the least author-backed of the 3. I mean, his was the least author-backed role of the 3, actually. And
right.
And what an incredible performance,
And he was fantastic. This look at somebody, he would just stare at Deepika like, I can't believe this man is your father. Just the look he would give. And Deepika would say, why are you staring at me? Her character would say. Definitely Namesake. It's one of the finest films made in India. It's one of the finest stories about Indian American immigrants. The book itself was just absolutely fabulous. And both he and Tabu were just absolutely brilliant. Definitely Lunchbox, I would say, which many people have seen. I think Pan Singh Tomar is one of Irfan's finest performances.
It is.
And if I can mention one more film that very few people have actually seen, I think The Warrior. It never opened in India. Maybe DVDs are available. It's never played. It doesn't even stream in India. But I mean, Asif Kapadia learned something about Irfan before any of the other actors. The Warrior opens with the camera right on Irfan's eyes, and on a big screen. When I saw it the first time, you just see his eyes, and these bulging eyes, and you realize that, my God, there's some greatness in this man as an actor. And Asif had discovered that a long time ago. And Warrior is a very quiet film. Very little dialogue is spoken. But it's also a very healing film. You feel really calm after watching it. So, Those.
I know you've said in the book that you met him only a few times and not for very long each time. But before we go, Aseem, is there an enduring memory that you have of Irfan when you think of him? Is there one memory that comes sort of just flashing back?
Well, it's a strange thing that I mentioned part of it in the book, but not exactly. What had happened was I was in Mumbai for the Mumbai Film Festival, and I was sitting in the Marriott Hotel in the coffee shop alone having dinner one day, where Irfan was sitting with a group of people, and I was seated right next to them, and I didn't want to go up and disturb them, and I'm like, this man knows me, but he was not showing any sign of recognition. Maybe he didn't notice me or whatever, he was too busy. So I was kind of very heartbroken. I'm like, listen, I've talked to this man so many times. He called me in the middle of, in New York, I was walking to the subway station when he called me on my phone and he said, "मैं इरफान खान बोल रहा हूँ, आपने namesake देखिए बताइए." So he didn't recognize me that day. So I was very quiet. I was heartbroken. The next day, there was the Mummy party at Four Seasons. And I was sitting at the party with Shubhra Gupta. And Irfan came with Manpreet, his manager, and came and sat very close to us and suddenly got up and shook hands with me and said, "How kya haal hai?" I'm like, okay, fine. He was not ignoring me the day before. I really felt Irfan was ignoring me the day before. But yeah, these little memories I think are really special. When he called me when I was walking to the subway station in New York, it was completely unexpected. And your heart skips a beat. Like, my God, Irfan Khan is calling me here in New York City, and there's traffic going everywhere, and I had to climb the steps to take the subway. But I had seen the namesake. He'd read an article where written about it, and he had not seen it, and he was very keen to know, "Kaisi lagi aapko film?" He asked me. So I said, "Aapne rula diya ji."
Rula diya is really the overarching theme of what he's done to us. Thank you, Aseem. Thank you. I really enjoyed this, and I really enjoyed the book. I think it's really it's great journalism. It's solid, hard nosed, questioning, and I think you really give us a sense, and especially when his voice is not there, it never feels absent, because I feel like you piece it together beautifully. You've kept the relevant bits, and I think that you found the right voices, who known him at different times in his life, who speak about some on craft, some on just the spirit, the character of the man. And I think that it's pieced together so beautifully. I think that this is something that we're going to hold on to, because the performances have ended, unfortunately. We have those films, of course, but this is what one can revisit and discover and just soak in to learn about this man that will always have left such a deep impact on us. So thank you for this incredible book, but thank you for this chat, Aseem. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you, Rajeev. When I was writing the book, and even after Irfan died, I didn't realize what an impact the book would have. I still get messages on Instagram, on Facebook, whatever. Young actors read the book and they tell me how they started crying reading the book and how the book really impacted them. And I'm so glad that it is there for people especially who are interested in acting. And Irfan, they can follow his career through the whatever hard work I did. So thank you, Rajeev.
Thank you. I really do think it is something that people will discover. I'm gonna hand it back to Nili Lakhani, and she is going to say the final words here. But I enjoyed this conversation so much. Thank you.
Thank you. I also enjoyed Rajeev. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Over to you, Nili.
Thank you, gentlemen, for this brilliant look into many would call him a genius of his time. And very aptly put, he's considered one of India's national treasures, as you put it. And many are still grieving this loss. So through your book, I think that people can at least relive parts of him. And through your storytelling, Aseem, Rajeev, thank you for being part of the panel. Aseem, IAAC, thanks you for being part of this family. For folks watching from home, if you have any questions and you're watching on social media, please go ahead, type your questions, and Aseem will interact with you. And where can we get the book, Aseem?
So it's available on Amazon.com in the US. It's available on Amazon. In India, it's available in bookstores as well as Amazon and Flipkart and other places. But in the US, you can buy it on Amazon.com. And I think it's available, whatever Amazon you have in Germany or France, whatever it is, people can purchase the book there. Yeah.
Fabulous. We'll get those links up there for our friends at home. Thank you, gentlemen. And this concludes today's session.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Rajeev.
Hello, I'm Nili Lakhani, IAAC Literary Festival Director. I want to thank you for joining our award-winning authors and their wondrous stories. IAAC is a 501c nonprofit. Programs like the one you just watched happen because of contributions from generous folks like you. Please donate to the IAAC so that we can support our artists and sustain our cultural programs. It is simple to donate by visiting the IAAC website at iaac.us. Learn about the insider benefits that membership gives you. On behalf of the entire IAAC board, stay safe and see you at our next event. Thank you.